Community road access. Locked off the community road before sunrise. Cold air biting my face while I stood by the post office bulletin board, with my keys and probate papers, hearing gravel crunch under tires. Brenda Walsh, the HOA president, stepped out with a clipboard, served a road repair fee notice, and snapped. Everyone pays, giving me 72 hours to comply. In my folder sat a county registry record printout official seal, visible listing the road's ownership line by line. I said, "Show me the record." Finally, someone fought back. The morning air in the Colorado foothills cuts clean and sharp, the kind that makes your lungs feel awake whether you want them to or not. I stand at the edge of my driveway with a ring of keys in my palm and a folder of probate papers under my arm, trying to decide which problem to tackle first. The cabin is still my grandfather's in every way that matters: pine sap smell in the wood, a crooked porch step that complains when you put weight on it, a rust-stained mailbox that leans like it's tired of standing. The only thing that feels new is me here alone, expected to sort a life down to signatures and boxes. A low engine purr climbs the curve of the road. Not the county truck kind of sound. Something smoother, expensive. A white SUV glides to a stop across the community road that cuts in front of my property, and a woman steps out like she's stepping onto a stage. Sunglasses, crisp jacket, clipboard held against her chest like it's a badge. "Excuse me," she calls, voice bright and sharpened at the same time. "Hello, are you the owner here?" I don't love the way she says owner, like the word has to pass her approval on the way out. "I'm Cole Brennan," I answer, keeping my tone neutral. "My grandfather passed. I'm handling the estate." Her smile widens without warming. "I'm Brenda Walsh, president of the Homeowners Association." I glance past her down the curve where rooftops peek through pines like they're trying not to be seen. "There's an HOA up here." "Oh, there's an HOA," she says, as if the concept should be obvious. She taps the clipboard twice. Tap, tap, and we have standards. I shift the folder under my arm. I'm not in a neighborhood. I'm on my grandfather's land. Brenda tilts her head. "This is a community road. Everyone pays." The words land heavy because she says them like they're law carved into stone. "Pays for what I ask." She flips a page on the clipboard with a practiced snap. "Road repairs. Maintenance, snow removal, gravel, drainage, the usual. Your share is past due." "I just got here," I say. 3 days ago I was in Ohio." "That's not my concern," Brenda replies. "Ownership carries responsibility. We've been patient, but the board voted last week to enforce compliance." Enforce compliance. I repeat, tasting the phrase. "And what exactly are you charging me?" Brenda turns the clipboard so I can see a printed sheet with bold headings and tidy boxes. Across the top, in a font meant to look official, it reads, "Notice of violation, fee assessment." She points with a manicured nail. "Community road repair charges. Initial assessment due immediately. Failure to pay results in daily fines and potential lien action." I look at the number and feel my throat tighten. That's a lot. It's what you owe, Brenda says. It's what everyone owes. 847 homeowners contribute to keep this community functional. It isn't optional. 847, I repeat more to myself than to her. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of property value, she corrects. And we protect it. That is literally my job. I exhale slowly, forcing my shoulders to stay relaxed. "Where's the ownership?" Brenda's smile flickers. "What? Where's the ownership?" I say again, clearer. "If you're charging me for road repairs, who owns the road?" The community, she says as if I'm slow. The association. Okay, I say. Show me. Her chin lifts a fraction. That's not how this works. That's exactly how it works, I tell her. You don't get to charge me for something without proof you have the right. Brenda lets out a small laugh that isn't laughter. Mr. Brennan, I have been doing this for years. People don't ask for proof. They pay their share and they move on. That's how living in a civilized community works. I'm not trying to be difficult, I say. I'm trying to understand how you can walk onto my driveway and hand me a bill for a road I didn't agree to. Her voice cools. You agreed by using it. I glance down at the road, packed dirt and gravel, winter-worn, running like a vein between trees. It's the only way to the cabin. And the only way for this community, she says, which is why we maintain it, which is why you pay, which is why she lowers the clipboard and leans slightly closer. You don't start off on the wrong foot with the people who can make life very inconvenient up here. The way she says inconvenient makes my stomach tighten. I keep my face steady. Is that a threat? It's a reality, Brenda replies. We have bylaws, covenants, enforcement authority. If you ignore the association, you will be fined. If you ignore the fines, you will be placed in collections. If you ignore collections, a lien can be filed. This is not personal. It feels personal, I say. Brenda's smile returns too quick. It's administrative. I glance at the paper again. I don't miss the small HOA logo in the corner, the kind of stamp people trust because it looks official. What's the deadline? 72 hours, she says, almost pleased. That's generous. Some communities do 24. 72 hours, I repeat, buying time. And if I don't pay, Brenda's eyes move to my truck parked near the porch, dusty, practical, clearly not matching her world. Then the fines begin at $500 per day. And I would strongly suggest you don't try to make this a scene. I feel heat rise behind my ribs. Not rage, yet something closer to disbelief. You come up here to a grieving man's cabin, and your first move is to bill him for road repairs. Grief does not exempt you from responsibility, Brenda says. Neither does whatever aesthetic you have going on here. I look at her sunglasses, her clipboard, the smooth SUV idling like it's impatient. Does responsibility include showing ownership? Brenda's mouth tightens. She lifts the clipboard again like a shield. Here's what we're going to do, Mr. Brennan. You're going to sign that you received this notice. I'm not signing anything I say. Her smile disappears. Then I will note refusal. Note whatever you want, I answer. But I'm not paying a penny until I see proof you own that road. Brenda steps forward and presses the paper into my hand hard enough that it stings paper slap against my palm. There, she says. Now you've been served. Welcome to the community. I look down at the notice. The words blur for a second as my pulse kicks up. Brenda turns back toward her SUV, then pauses like she remembers something. One more thing, she calls over her shoulder. Don't think you can hide up here. People are watching. 847 sets of eyes. Her door shuts with a solid final thump. The SUV eases away, tires crunching gravel, and for a moment the only sound is wind in the pines and the distant, ordinary life of a place I didn't know I'd inherited. I stand there with the HOA notice in my hand, staring at the line that says, Community Road repair charges due immediately, and my jaw clenches so hard it aches. What would you do? I don't even get the chance to answer myself, because the next morning flashing lights light up the community road. The knocking starts before the sun comes up sharp and steady, like someone rapping a flashlight against wood. I sit up in bed, heart already racing. For a second, I think it's Brenda again, back with another clipboard and that polished smile. Then I hear a man's voice. Sheriff's Department. Mr. Brennan. I pull on my jacket and open the door. Two deputies stand on the porch, breath fogging in the cold mountain air. Red and blue lights wash over the community road, turning the gravel purple, then red, then blue again. Yes, I say, that's me. The older deputy nods. We got a call about a dispute involving the community road. A dispute, I repeat flat. The younger one glances down at a notepad. HOA says you're refusing to comply with road maintenance charges. They're concerned it could escalate. I feel a pulse of heat behind my eyes. Escalate how? They didn't specify, the older deputy says carefully. They also mentioned possible back taxes tied to road upkeep. Back taxes, I say. On a road. The younger deputy shrugs. That's what we were told. I step aside so they can see the cabin behind me. I just inherited this place. I ask them one question: who owns the road they're charging me to repair? The older deputy studies my face for a moment, then nods like he believes me. Do you have proof you're the owner of this property probate paperwork? I say, grabbing the folder off the table and holding it up. Deed transfers in process. That's fine, he says. We're not here to take sides, just documenting contact, so they can send you every time someone questions a bill I ask. The younger deputy shifts uncomfortably. They said you were being uncooperative. I let out a short, humorless laugh. I asked for proof. The older deputy raises a hand, calm. All right. We've made contact. Nobody's threatening anyone. That's all this is. They turn back toward their cruiser. Before they leave, the younger one looks over his shoulder. HOA said they'd pursue enforcement if you don't pay. Enforcement, I repeat. For road repairs. Neither of them answers. The cruiser rolls away, lights still flashing until the bend in the road swallows them. I stand there for a long moment, staring at the community road, like it personally betrayed me. Yesterday, it was just gravel and dirt. Now it's a legal excuse to knock on my door before dawn. I don't go back to bed. By mid-morning, I'm driving into town. The public library sits right off Main Street, squeezed between a diner and the post office. An American flag snaps in the wind out front. It feels like neutral ground. Inside, the air smells like old paper and lemon cleaner. A couple of men sit at a table near the window, nursing coffee and talking low. Behind the desk, a woman with silver hair and thick glasses looks up as soon as I walk in. You're Ezra Brennan's grandson, she says. I stop short. Yes, ma'am. I'm Opal Cartwright, she says, already standing. What can I help you with? I need records, I say. About the community road. Her expression tightens just enough for me to notice. Let me guess, she says. They're charging you. For community road repairs, I say. And now the sheriff's been to my door. Opal exhales slowly. Come with me. She leads me into a back room lined with metal shelves and labeled binders. A bulletin board on the wall is crowded with flyers, church suppers, town meetings, missing pets. She pulls open a drawer and takes out a small index card box, flipping through cards with practiced ease. What exactly did they say, she asks. That the road belongs to the HOA, I answer. That everyone pays. Opal stops flipping. She pulls out a single card and holds it between her fingers. It's worn stamped official in a way that doesn't try too hard. This, she says quietly, is the registry reference for that road. I lean closer, reading the faded text. File numbers. Dates. Ownership references. Opal lowers her voice. That community road was never filed under the HOA. The words hit harder than I expect. So, they don't own it. They don't, she says. Not on record. Then why are they charging me? Opal slides the card back into the box and pulls a folder from the shelf. Inside are maps and photocopied summaries from the county system. She points to a line where the association's name should be. It isn't there. Because people don't check, she says, and because roads scare folks. You mess with access, you mess with their lives. I rub a hand over my face. The deputies mentioned back taxes. She nods once. They like to say that. Makes it sound bigger than it is. I look up. Who's backing this? Opal hesitates, then meets my eyes. Brenda Walsh's husband works at the county assessor's office. My stomach tightens. You're kidding. I wish I were, she says. Dennis Walsh. Been there a long time. Everything clicks into place, the confidence, the threats, the way she talked like paperwork was a weapon. Opal closes the folder. I can give you copies, she says. Enough to get you started. I nod, gripping the edge of the table. Anger simmers under my skin, but beneath it is something worse. Powerlessness. Because knowing the truth and being able to use it aren't the same thing. As Opal walks toward the copier, I stare at the registry card in her hand and think about the flashing lights on my driveway that morning. If the community road isn't theirs, why are they charging repairs? I stopped on the community road before I went anywhere else. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts, whether you want to or not. Frost clung to the gravel, turning the surface pale and brittle under my boots. Yesterday, this road had been nothing more than a way in and out. Today, it felt like a line someone had drawn through my life and dared me to cross. I looked down its curve toward the cluster of houses tucked into the trees. Every delivery truck, every ambulance, every contractor used this strip of gravel. Brenda hadn't been exaggerating about its importance. The community road wasn't just access, it was leverage. Whoever controlled it controlled everyone who depended on it. That realization sat heavy in my chest as I got back into my truck and headed for town. The county records office was tucked behind the courthouse, a low building, with narrow windows and fluorescent lights that made everything look tired. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. People waited in plastic chairs, clutching folders like shields. At the counter, a clerk glanced up at me with the practiced indifference of someone who lived in forms and stamps. I need to look up ownership records, I said. For the community road in Pinnacle Ridge. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Subdivision roads can be tricky, she said. You have a parcel number, I don't, I said. Just the location. She sighed softly, then typed anyway. The keyboard clicked in steady bursts. Click, click, click. After a moment, she turned the screen slightly toward me. This is what's on file. I leaned closer. Lines of text filled the screen, parcel references, recording dates, legal descriptions. I scanned for the HOA's name. It wasn't there. My pulse picked up. Can you scroll up? She did. Still nothing. Down, I said. She scrolled again. Still no HOA. No Pinnacle Ridge Community Association. No Brenda Walsh. Just an older record tied to land long before the subdivision existed. That doesn't look right, I said quietly. The clerk shrugged. It's what's recorded. I need a copy, I said. Official. She slid a form across the counter. Fill this out. I sat at a metal table bolted to the floor, and filled in my name with careful strokes. My hand shook just enough to annoy me. I kept thinking about the deputies on my porch, about the word enforcement hanging in the cold air like a threat. When I handed the form back, the clerk stamped it and dropped it into a tray. The stamp came down with a dull, final sound. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Give it a few minutes." I waited. Every second felt longer than the last. When she finally returned, she handed me a thin packet warm from the printer. The top page carried an official seal and a registry reference number that looked boring enough to be deadly. I read it once. Then again. The words didn't change. The community road was never theirs. No HOA ownership recorded, no transfer, no authority tied to the association. The paper didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It simply stated a fact and moved on. I walked outside and sat in my truck, the packet resting on my lap. For a moment, I just stared through the windshield at the courthouse lawn, trying to process the weight of what I was holding. Then I pulled out my phone. Opal had given me a name and a number written in neat block letters. I dialed. Janet Torres, a woman answered, her voice sharp and alert. "This is Janet." "My name is Cole Brennan," I said. "Opal Cartwright suggested I call you." There was a brief pause. "Opal doesn't suggest things lightly," Janet said. "What's going on? The HOA is charging me for community road repairs," I said. "They sent deputies to my cabin. They're threatening fines and liens. I asked for proof they own the road." And she said, "I'm looking at the registry now," I said, tapping the packet. "It shows the community road was never filed under the HOA." Another pause, shorter this time. "Do you have the recorded reference number and read it to me?" I did. My voice steadied as I went, like the numbers themselves were holding me upright. When I finished, Janet exhaled slowly. "All right," she said. "That confirms it." "So they don't own it," I said. "They don't," she replied. "And charging people for repairs on a road they don't own is not a gray area." "What is it then?" I asked. "Illegal," Janet said without hesitation. "You can't assess maintenance fees tied to ownership you don't have." I leaned back against the seat. They made it sound airtight. "That's how people like this operate," she said. "They rely on confidence and paperwork most folks don't question." "So what do I do now?" I asked. "You stop engaging with them directly," Janet said. "Everything goes through documentation. You send me copies of that registry record, and you do not sign anything else they give you." "They handed me a notice," I said. 72 hours. Janet gave a short, humorless laugh. "Let them count down. The registry outranks a clipboard." I closed my eyes for a moment. The tension in my shoulders eased just a little. "They've been charging everyone," I said. "For years, probably." "Then this isn't just about you," Janet replied. "It's about what happens when someone finally checks the record." I looked down at the official seal again, tracing it with my thumb. "So this changes things," I said. "Yes," Janet said. "If the registry proves the road was never theirs, everything changes." I ended the call and sat there in the quiet cab, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. For the first time since Brenda stepped onto my driveway, the anger in my chest shifted into something else. Hope. Not the kind that fixed everything overnight, but the kind that meant I wasn't trapped. I folded the registry papers carefully and slipped them back into the folder. Because now I knew something Brenda didn't want anyone to know. And once the registry speaks, it doesn't whisper. Brenda showed up again 2 days later, right after breakfast, like she knew exactly when irritation turned into fatigue. I heard her SUV before I saw it, the tires crunching along the community road with a confidence that felt practiced. I stepped out onto the porch, just as she parked the engine idling, like she expected this to be quick. This time she wasn't carrying a clipboard. She held a thick manila folder tucked under her arm, edges worn just enough to suggest age. Strategy, not coincidence. "Cole," she said, smiling as she walked toward the steps. "I think it's time we resolved the road repair issue." "You called the sheriff on me," I said. She waved a hand, lightly dismissive. "The association followed protocol after you refused to comply. But I don't want things to get unpleasant between neighbors." "We're not neighbors," I said. "You just charge me like one." Her smile thinned, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stepped up onto the porch without asking and held out the folder. "I brought documentation," she said. "Something that should clear up your concerns." I didn't take it right away. "You mean proof you own the road?" "I mean an agreement," Brenda replied. "An old agreement about the road. Signed years ago, long before you arrived." I finally took the folder. Inside was a single document, yellowed at the edges, stamped with seals meant to impress. The title ran across the top in bold lettering, announcing itself like authority. "Agreement regarding community road maintenance." Brenda watched me closely as I read. "This grants the HOA authority to assess and collect repair charges," she said. "It's been the basis for maintenance for years. Everyone pays." I scanned the page again, slower this time. Something about it bothered me immediately. The paper looked old, but the language didn't. Phrases jumped out: electronic processing, standardized fee schedules. Things that sounded modern dressed up in fake age. "This was signed in the late 90s, I asked. "Yes," Brenda said. "When the community was first formalized." "And yet it references online payments," I said. "That's interesting." Her eyes flicked to the line I was pointing at. "That's just an updated clause. Updated how I asked." Without being refiled, Brenda's smile tightened. "Cole, you're not a lawyer. You're overthinking this." "I asked one question," I said. "Who owns the community road?" She crossed her arms. "The community does. Through the association." "Then it should be in the registry," I said. Her jaw set. "This agreement is valid." "Is it recorded?" I asked. Brenda exhaled sharply. "You're being difficult." "I'm being careful," I said, "because you're charging me money." She leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. "You don't want to start a war with the HOA. People up here don't like troublemakers." "I don't like bills without proof," I said. Brenda straightened, irritation flashing through her composure. "Fine. If you insist on dragging attorneys into this, that's your choice." "I already have," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You hired a lawyer, Janet Torres," I said. "Denver." The name landed. I could see it in the way Brenda froze for just half a second too long. "That's unnecessary," she said quickly. "This is a community matter." "It became legal when you brought paperwork," I replied. Brenda scoffed. "That document is legitimate." "Then you won't mind hearing what my attorney has to say," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. Brenda's smile returned brittle. "Go ahead." I dialed Janet and put the call on speaker. Cole. Janet answered alert. "Everything okay?" "She's here," I said. "Brenda Walsh, HOA president. She brought an agreement about the road." Janet didn't hesitate. "Ms. Walsh," she said calmly, her voice carrying across the porch. "This is Janet Torres." Brenda lifted her chin. "We have authority to charge road repair fees. Based on what recorded ownership, Janet asked. The agreement, Brenda said, tapping the folder. An agreement isn't ownership, Janet replied. Is it filed? Brenda's eyes hardened. It doesn't need to be. Yes, it does, Janet said evenly. Because I have the registry in front of me. The air shifted. What registry? Brenda demanded. The county registry, Janet said. The one that controls ownership. And it shows no HOA ownership, no easement, no authority tied to your association. Brenda laughed, sharp and forced. That's ridiculous. It's recorded, Janet said. Your document isn't. Brenda's cheeks flushed. You can't just dismiss an agreement. I can, Janet replied. Because the registry overrides everything. I watched Brenda's fingers tighten around the folder. The manila bent slightly under the pressure. Janet continued unhurried. The registry proves the community road was never theirs. The porch went silent. Brenda opened her mouth, then closed it. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. This isn't over, she said. You're isolating yourself from the entire community. I'm asking you to stop charging me for a road you don't own, I said. She stared at me for a long second, then turned sharply and walked down the steps. At her SUV, she paused. Enjoy your little technicality, she said over her shoulder. We'll see how far it gets you. She drove off, the sound of her tires grinding against the community road, echoing long after she disappeared around the bend. I stood there, phone still in my hand. Janet spoke softly now. Send me a copy of that document, she said. I want it examined. You think it's fake, I said. I think it was meant to scare you, she replied. And fear doesn't hold up in court. I looked down the road again at the gravel path that had turned into a battleground. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had charged repairs for a road they never owned. By the time I drove into town again, the story had already outrun me. I stopped at the diner because it was the kind of place my grandfather used to trust: coffee that tasted the same every day, grease that never fully left the air, and a bulletin board by the register that carried the town's real news: lost dogs, church suppers, a flyer for a community center craft fair, and right in the middle of it, someone had pinned a handwritten note on lined paper. HOA, charging road repairs, check your fees. I stared at it a second too long. The waitress caught my look and leaned closer with a pot of coffee. You're Ezra's grandson, she said, not asking. You the one fighting Brenda, I'm the one asking questions, I said. She poured coffee into my mug like she was fortifying me. Questions are dangerous around here, she muttered. Then she straightened up louder. What you gonna do if they tell you to pay anyway? I looked at my mug, steam curling up like it had a mind of its own. Would you still pay? I asked, mostly to her, partly to the room. A man at the counter snorted. Depends who's asking, he said. If it's Brenda, you pay so she leaves you alone. Another man shook his head. That woman's been charging community fees since before my kid graduated. The word charging moved through the diner like a match to dry grass. It wasn't just my problem anymore. It was everyone's little resentment given a name. Outside, my phone buzzed. Janet. Cole, she said without preamble. I'm filing what I asked, though I already knew. A formal complaint, she said, and a request to compel records. If they're collecting repair charges tied to ownership they don't have, we put it into public record. I swallowed. That makes it real. It's been real, Janet replied. We're just forcing it into daylight. By noon, I was standing in the county office, again this time on the other side of the counter. Janet had driven up from Denver, blazer, sharp hair pinned back like she didn't have time for anyone's nonsense. She placed a packet on the counter with the calm precision of someone setting down evidence, not paperwork. The clerk flipped through it, eyebrows rising. "This is against the HOA." "It's against unlawful assessments," Janet said. "Specifically, community road repair charges levied without recorded authority." The clerk stamped pages one by one. The sound echoed in the small office, each stamp like a door closing on Brenda's ability to bluff. When the clerk finished, she slid a copy back toward us. "There," she said. "Filed." I stared at the ink and the date like it could burn through the paper. Janet tucked it into her folder and nodded once. "Now," she said quietly, as we walked out, "they can't pretend this is private." They didn't waste time proving her right. By late afternoon, a news van was parked near the edge of the community center lot, camera tripod already set up. A reporter in a puffy jacket paced while a producer held a clipboard. Another clipboard, another person who thought paper controlled reality. I recognized the reporter's face from the local evening broadcast. She spotted me and her eyes sharpened with the kind of excitement that meant she'd smelled a story. "Cole Brennan," she called, jogging a few steps closer. "Channel 7. Is it true you filed a complaint over HOA road repair charges?" I stopped. "I filed because I was charged for repairs on a road the HOA doesn't own." Her cameraman adjusted his lens. "Is the road really theirs?" she asked, voice lifted so the mic could catch it clean. "That's the point," I said. "It isn't." She blinked, then leaned in. "So why were they charging everyone?" Before I could answer, an SUV rolled up behind the news van, white paint flashing in the winter sun. "Brenda." She stepped out, wearing a smile that looked practiced for cameras, not neighbors. Her gaze flicked to the reporter first, then to me. When she spoke, her voice carried sweet enough for television. "This is a misunderstanding," she announced. "We're in the process of clarifying historical records." Janet stepped into frame beside me, calm as stone. "The records are already clear," she said. Brenda's smile tightened. "Janet," she said, like the name tasted bad. The reporter's eyes bounced between them. "Ms. Walsh, are you saying the HOA doesn't own the community road?" Brenda's gaze snapped to the reporter. "The community has maintained it for years," she said quickly. "That's what matters. We're just trying to keep property values stable." Janet didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Maintenance does not equal ownership," she said, "and charging repair fees without authority is unlawful." Brenda's face hardened for a split second before she smoothed it again. She turned back toward me, stepping closer as if the cameras didn't exist. "Cole," she said softly, "we don't have to do this." I didn't move. "You already did it," I said. Her eyes flicked to the reporter again, then back to me. "We can make the road repair issue go away," she murmured, voice lowered like an offer instead of a threat. Quietly. Janet stepped forward. "Don't," she said. Brenda's smile vanished. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns my client," Janet replied. "And it concerns 847 homeowners who've been paying charges they didn't legally owe." The reporter's mouth fell slightly open like she'd just been handed the headline. Brenda's cheeks flushed. "You're trying to destroy this community," she snapped, forgetting the cameras for a moment. "I'm trying to stop you from charging people for something you don't own," I said. A couple of residents had gathered near the edge of the lot, drawn by the camera and the tension. One older woman clasped her purse with both hands, eyes wide. A man in a work jacket shook his head as if he'd been waiting years for someone to say it out loud. Brenda caught the small crowd and seemed to realize too late that public was her weakness. Courtrooms had rules. Gossip didn't. Janet leaned slightly toward me. "We do this the right way," she said low. Public meeting. Registry on screen. I nodded, throat tight. When tomorrow, she said. And we invite everyone. Brenda stared at us, breathing a little faster now, like the air had gotten thinner. She forced a smile back onto her face for the cameras. This will be handled internally, she said too brightly. Then she turned on her heel and climbed into her SUV tires, spitting gravel as she pulled away. The reporter watched her go, then looked back at me. So, tomorrow, she asked. I held Janet's filed copy in my mind like a weight. Tomorrow, I said. Because tomorrow, the registry speaks. The community center had never looked that alive. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, headlights were already lining the entrance and people were streaming in like the building itself was a promise. A local news van sat near the curb with its side door open, cables snaking across the pavement. Inside, bright white lights turned the windows into glowing squares. I could hear the low roar of voices before I even stepped through the doors, an anxious, hungry sound like everyone had been waiting for someone to finally say the quiet part out loud. Janet was already there. She stood near the front with a laptop open on a folding table, calm, as if she'd walked into a courtroom instead of a storm. The projector screen behind her was blank, waiting. "You ready?" she asked when she saw me. My mouth was dry. "I think so." "You don't have to be fearless," she said. "You just have to be clear." I nodded, gripping the edge of the folder in my hand like it could anchor me. Rows of metal chairs filled fast. Couples, retirees, parents with kids tugging at sleeves, men in work jackets with arms crossed like they'd rather be anywhere else except they weren't leaving. Someone near the back muttered, "About time." A camera operator adjusted his rig. The faint whir of the lens made my stomach tighten. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. This was a stage. I stepped to the microphone. It squealed once, then settled. "Thank you for coming," I said, and the room quieted in a wave like everyone leaned in at the same time. "My name is Cole Brennan. 2 weeks ago, I was handed a bill for community road repairs." A murmur rippled through the chairs. I glanced toward the side door. Brenda wasn't here yet. "That bill came with threats," I continued. 72 hours, daily fines, liens, deputies on my porch." The room shifted, discomfort turning into anger. I clicked the remote Janet handed me. The first slide appeared. HOA Road Repair Charges. The title alone drew a low sound from the crowd, a collective recognition. "These are the charges being assessed," I said, pointing to the breakdown Janet had pulled from the notice. "Many of you have paid them. Some of you have paid them for years." A woman near the front raised her hand, voice shaking. "We thought we had to." "I know," I said. "That's why we're here." The side door opened, and a cold draft swept in with the sound. Heads turned. Brenda walked in late, as if lateness were power. She wore a tailored coat and that same polished smile, but her eyes were tight. 2 men followed her, lawyers by the look of them, faces, blank hands carrying briefcases like shields. She stopped halfway down the aisle and looked straight at me. "Cole," she called, voice loud enough to cut the room. "This is inappropriate." Janet stepped to the microphone without raising her voice. "Sit down, Ms. Walsh," she said. "You'll have your chance to respond after the registry is shown." Brenda's smile faltered. "The registry is being misinterpreted." Janet didn't blink. "Then it should be easy for you." Brenda's jaw clenched, but she moved toward the front row and sat stiff-backed, her lawyers leaning close to whisper in her ear. I clicked to the next slide. "Registry, no ownership on file." The screen filled with a clean official printout, parcel references, recorded instruments, and one line that mattered most, no HOA, listed no association recorded. The room went still, like even breathing got cautious. "This is the county registry," Janet said, her voice carrying. "And it's the record the law recognizes. It shows the HOA never owned the community road." A man near the middle stood up halfway from his chair. "Never," he said, like he couldn't believe the word. Janet nodded once. "Never." Brenda laughed sharply, too loud. "That's absurd." Janet turned slightly, not giving Brenda the center. "Ms. Walsh brought an old agreement claiming authority," Janet said. "We reviewed it. It is not recorded. And it contains modern language inconsistent with the date it claims." Brenda snapped to her feet. "You're calling me a liar in front of my community." The room erupted into overlapping voices. "You charged us. My husband paid that for years, so you don't own the road at all." Brenda's face flushed, the mask cracking. "This is a witch hunt," I raised my hand. "Everyone listen." The noise quieted, but the anger stayed. It hung over the chairs like heat. I clicked again. A short audio clip appeared on the screen, a waveform ready to play. Janet had warned me we'd use it if we needed to. I didn't want to, but Brenda had already turned this into a performance. I pressed play. Brenda's voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable. "We can make the road repair issue go away." Quietly. Gasps scattered through the crowd like sparks. Brenda's face drained. "That's edited," she shouted. "That's illegal." Janet's tone stayed flat. "It's your voice, and it's relevant." Brenda took a step toward the front, shaking now. "Turn that off!" "That's enough," a woman near the back yelled. "You've been stealing." Brenda spun wild-eyed. "I protected this community. Without me, you'd—" The side door opened again, but this time it wasn't Brenda's entrance. A woman in a dark blazer walked in with calm, deliberate steps. She held a badge up just long enough for the front rows to see it before she tucked it away. My stomach dropped. I recognized her from Janet's earlier calls. Agent Kim. She moved to the aisle, eyes, steady voice firm. "Brenda Walsh." Brenda froze mid-breath. "Who are you?" "Special Agent Sarah Kim," the woman said. "We need to speak with you about financial activity connected to HOA road repair charges and related filings." Brenda's lawyers stood up at once, voices quick and sharp. "She's not answering questions," Agent Kim didn't argue. She simply nodded to two uniformed officers waiting near the door. Brenda's eyes darted around the room, searching for control and finding none. "This is insane," she hissed. "You can't do this to me." Agent Kim stepped closer. "Ms. Walsh, please turn around." Brenda shook her head hard. "No. No, this is my community." The officer's hand touched her wrist, and then the sound filled the room, small, metallic finale. A handcuff click. Brenda's face crumpled into rage. "You're all going to regret this." Nobody answered. Nobody even moved, because the registry had already spoken, and the room went silent. The headline didn't shout. It didn't need to. I saw it taped crookedly to the bulletin board outside the post office, right between a flyer for a lost cat and a notice about snow plowing schedules. HOA charged road repairs. On road they didn't own, no exclamation point. No adjectives. Just the truth, printed in black ink, and left where anyone could read it while waiting on their mail. That was how justice showed up, quiet, undeniable. By the time I got to Janet's office later that morning, the phones were already ringing. Not frantic anymore. Measured. curious, relieved. She waved me in without looking up from her desk. Papers were spread out in clean stacks, each one stamped, signed, finished. "They dissolved the board at 8 this morning," she said, tapping one folder. "Unanimous vote. Emergency session." I leaned against the doorframe. Just like that. "Like rats abandoning a ship," she replied calmly. Once the registry went public, they couldn't pretend anymore. Outside her window downtown, traffic moved the same as always. No sirens, no crowds, just a town absorbing a correction. Janet slid a document across the desk toward me. "Court order," she said. "Effective immediately." I read the first paragraph twice just to be sure. All HOA road repair charges were suspended. All outstanding balances voided. All funds collected under false authority ordered returned to homeowners. The language was plain, almost gentle. "They're refunding everyone I asked." "Yes," Janet said. "Checks or direct deposits depending on how they paid. It'll take weeks, but it's happening." I exhaled slowly, like my chest had been holding air hostage for months. "People are going to freak out." "They already did," she said, faint smile touching her mouth. Then they calmed down. I thought about Brenda, about how loudly she'd tried to control the room, the narrative, the silence. None of it mattered now. "What about the road?" I asked. Janet reached for another folder. "That's the important part." She opened it and turned the page so I could see. The community road. Its legal description, boundaries, easements, had finally been registered properly. Not under the HOA, not under a shell entity, under its actual owner, recorded cleanly, publicly. For the first time, Janet said, "It's filed the way it should have been years ago." I nodded, throat tight. "So no more surprise bills. No more threats," she said. "No more pretending." When I stepped back outside, the afternoon sun had softened. A few people lingered near the bulletin board, reading the article like they didn't quite trust it yet. An older man turned when he saw me. "You're Cole, right?" "Yes, sir." He nodded once. "My wife cried when she saw the notice. She thought we'd done something wrong all these years." I swallowed. "You didn't." He smiled, small and tired. Someone finally fought back. The words stuck with me as I walked down the sidewalk. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. At the community center later that evening, folding tables had been set up again, but this time no cameras, no tension. Just pens, coffee, and people lining up in quiet order. Janet stood at one end of the table explaining terms patiently. New agreements, transparent fees, no road repair charges tied to lies. I watched as neighbors signed their names, careful, deliberate strokes. Some paused before signing like they were letting go of something heavy. A woman I recognized from the meeting looked up at me. "Is this really it?" she asked. "Is it over?" I nodded. "It is." She let out a breath that sounded like she'd been saving it for years. When the last paper was signed, Janet stacked the documents neatly and closed the folder. "That's the end of it," she said. Outside, the community road stretched into the dusk, unchanged in shape but transformed in meaning. No longer a tool, no longer a threat, just a road. I stood there a moment longer, listening to the quiet that followed accountability. Finally, the charges stopped. The first time I heard machinery on the community road again, my stomach tightened out of habit. For weeks, the sound of engines meant trouble. Brenda's SUV, a deputy's cruiser, somebody arriving with a folder meant to make you feel small. So when the low rumble echoed through the pines one bright morning, I stepped onto the porch, ready to brace myself. But it wasn't a white SUV. It was a county grader, slow and steady, its blade leveling the gravel in clean passes. Behind it, a dump truck poured fresh rock in a controlled line. No drama, no threats, no emergency assessments. Just work being done the way it should have been done from the beginning. A man in an orange vest walked up the driveway holding a clipboard, different kind of clipboard. His boots were dusty, his expression neutral. "Morning," he called. "We're smoothing out the washboard sections. Should be done by noon." I blinked. "Who authorized it?" He pointed down the road, casual. "New community board. Transparent budget. County matched the cost since it's now properly registered." Properly registered. The phrase landed like relief in my chest. A simple set of words that would have saved everyone years of fees and fear. I watched the grader roll forward, metal scraping gravel with a clean, even sound. The road looked the same and completely different, at the same time still a path through trees, but no longer a weapon. Later that day, the smell of barbecue drifted across the ridge. Someone had set up grills near the community center, not for a fundraiser, not for a mandatory fee event, just because the sun was out and people finally felt like breathing again. I walked over with a pack of store-bought buns under my arm, the kind my grandfather used to grab without thinking. The parking lot was crowded with pickup trucks and family SUVs. Kids chased each other between picnic tables. Music played softly from someone's speaker, nothing fancy, just enough to fill the air. A neighbor I recognized from the town hall meeting, middle-aged, weathered-face hands that looked like they'd built half the things he owned, lifted a paper plate in greeting. "Cole," he called. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. He gestured toward the road beyond the trees. "Never thought I'd see the day that road got fixed without a surprise invoice." I gave a small smile. Me neither. Near the tables, a few people were talking about the new board. No titles thrown around like crowns. No president acting like royalty. Just neighbors reading line items out loud, making sure everyone understood what money was coming in and where it went. A woman with a notepad, she couldn't have been older than 30, stood with two retirees and patiently explained, "Everything's posted. Every receipt. If you don't like it, you vote. If you have questions, you ask." One of the retirees shook his head in wonder. Imagine that. Asking questions without getting threatened. The post office bulletin board had been updated too. The old headline about the road repair charges was still there, but someone had added a second sheet beneath it. "New road maintenance plan, budget posted weekly, no fear, just information." As the afternoon light softened, I wandered down toward the post office with a neighbor named Mark. He'd introduced himself at the meeting, voice trembling when he admitted he'd been paying Brenda's fees for 7 years. Mark stopped at the edge of the newly leveled gravel and looked down the road like he was seeing it for the first time. "Feels honest now," he said quietly. I glanced at him. "What does he?" Pointed with his chin. "The whole thing. The road. The place, like it's not waiting to punish you." For a second, I didn't know what to say. My grandfather had lived with that waiting feeling. The idea that any day someone could show up with a notice and take something from him, not because they owned it, but because they acted like they did. Mark rubbed the back of his neck. "My wife keeps saying she didn't realize how tense she'd been until it stopped." I nodded. "That's how they get you," I said. "You think it's normal." We stood there in the quiet, listening to birds and distant laughter from the barbecue, the kind of sounds you don't notice when you're always bracing for the next threat. Mark looked over at me. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we keep it clean," I said. "We keep it recorded. We keep it transparent. And if anyone tries to pull this again, People won't be scared to check. He gave a small, grateful smile. You really think this changes anything beyond here? I thought about the way Brenda had reacted to the cameras, the way power shrank when it couldn't hide behind paperwork and intimidation. I thought about the registry printout boring official unstoppable. It already did, I said. Later back at the cabin, I walked down to where my driveway met the community road. The gravel was smoother under my boots now. The evening air smelled like wood smoke and cooked meat carried on the wind. Somewhere down the ridge, a kid laughed so hard it turned into a squeal. I looked along the road as it curved into the trees, connecting house to house, family to family, no longer an artery controlled by one person's ego. I thought about how close I came to paying just to make it stop. How many people had paid because it was easier than fighting? And then I thought about what had actually stopped it. Not my anger, not my stubbornness, not even the meeting. A record. I let that settle in the way you let a lesson settle when you know you're going to carry it for the rest of your life. The registry didn't just stop the charges, it proved the road was never theirs. The morning after the posted order went up, the flag at the community center snapped once in the wind, and a sealed notice sat on the bulletin board, like a quiet line in the sand. The registry record wasn't dramatic, but when it was read into the record, the room exhaled together, and the power that once pressed us simply collapsed. Justice didn't arrive shouting. It arrived stamped, filed, and shared, and that was enough. Watching neighbors sign the new agreement felt like a ceremony, no speeches, just relief. Finally, someone fought back. If this story sounds familiar, share how transparency changed something in your own community.